Thank you very much. Session after lunch and session before the dinner can very easily go downhill. So let me try to make it a little bit more interesting. The topic is obviously a pretty, I would say, a topic which has got a lot of focus from the boards on trust in AI. But before I get into the panel, let me ask people in the audience, how many of you read crime novels? Just raise your hands. Okay, good. Have you heard of people like John Grisham, yeah? George Martin, David Connolly, yeah? So what's common to all of them other than the fact that they all write crime stories? Can somebody give any answer? Just shout it out. I don't know whether you have mics or not, but just shout it out. Say that again? They're rich, unlike me, okay? Anything else? Okay. They're all part of a group of 17 people who have sued OpenAI for copyright infringement in the state of New York. So think about this way, right? If somebody is using OpenAI to just pen a story, we had a session a few hours back on AI and artists. And think about them, one of them uses OpenAI to write a story. You could potentially get sued, right? So the question comes up, can you trust AI? Okay, and that's what this panel is all about. Okay, so before I get there, I'm really a fabulous panel here. We got people who are working with clients within the organization. We got leaders who are working with external clients. So I think we're going to get great perspective out here. So let me start with, Vikas, let me throw this question up for you.
Sure.
Yeah. Bias in algorithm is a well-known concept, right? We know that there are issues in the financial services in underwriting. Certain racial profiles get neglected or deliberately not picked up. So how do you build trust in AI systems, especially in areas of, let's say, finance, healthcare, which a lot of these involve decisions around individuals, right? So what's been your experience and what's the kind of advice you will be giving?
Okay. So this is a very interesting question that the bias is one of the integral part of any AI system that you think. So, let's connect it to some real life. Everyone trusts their parents, right? You trust your parents, you trust your spouse. Why do you trust your parents and why do you trust your spouse? If you think about artificial intelligence, the main goal of artificial intelligence is to mimic the human behavior. Let's go back to roots. If I trust my parents, why do I trust them? And try to connect them with the AI system itself. As a child, I trust my parents because there is an historical pattern, right? They take care of you, they feed you. Same thing with the AI system. There is an historical pattern that creates a trust in you, that you get some sort of an accuracy or precision or recall, which will take care of those biases in the system itself. I trust my parents. Why? Because they explain everything to me, every decision they make for me, they try to explain it. Can an AI system be built which can explain why a decision it made for me, the way it made it? How does it do it? I made this decision for you because I think this is good for you. An AI system can tell you that I created this prediction for you. For example, in finance, a credit card application gets denied, and you get a mail in your mailbox saying that your application was denied because X, Y, Z reason. Can an AI system explain that to you, that this is why I did this? Similarly, again, nurturing a very unbiased data is extremely important to control the bias in your results. Similarly, going back to the analogy of your parents do an unbiased nurturing of you. You need to nurture your data in a similar way to control that bias. Lastly, I would say that, one of the biggest and most important point about controlling the bias is a feedback mechanism within your AI systems. Your parents might give you your feedback that what you are doing right and what you are not doing right to make you a better human being. They give you that feedback, you take that feedback, and you continuously monitor your behavior, and then go back to the AI system, you need to do the same thing. You need to continuously get the feedbacks from your users that what kind of biases exist in your systems and then try to control those biases.
No, I like that parent-child analogy. I wish I listened to my parents a little bit more in my life, but nevertheless. So Shri, let me go to you. Yeah, you work for HSBC, and I heard this term called hallucinations, right? With respect to LLMs and the output from OpenAI and all this kind of things, right? How do you address this issue? Yeah.
Okay, first and foremost, let's break this first. To understand when we talk about generative AI, LLM, where is it stemming from? What is hallucination? So what is generative AI? Basically, at some level, 3 components create generative AI, right? A generative component, a pre-trained component, and a transformer component. I'm not going into transformer. Generative element, by nature, is supposed to create or generate a bit of new content. Trained on and pre-training is talking about the data on which that content has been trained. So when we now start talking hallucination, imagine if you want to have a summarization, let's say, of documents. Sometimes you want to have summarization of policies, or you have very large documents. You need to have somebody who's looking at all of that information and giving you an output that people can understand. So by nature, there will be a generative content which is so human-like and so factual-like in nature, which looks similar to or which looks really authentic, but may not be fact-based. Question that you asked is how do you control for it, right? It is so inherent in the model that we are running. Now, when it comes to hallucination, there are some technical safeguards we try to take, and there are more policy-related safeguards that the organizations are trying to take. But at the same time, I must say that we are at the grace period of co-creating with generative AI. So when it comes to some of this model-related, technology-related safeguards, of course, you'll do filtering. I'm going to filter out unsafe words, unsafe content. I don't want that to flash out, irrespective of what AI is hallucinating. And there are models and there are techniques that allow you to do that. I want to provide a ref check. So every time AI provides an output, I'm transparent enough to say, A, this is generated by AI. B, also provide references and to that output to say, hey, this is taken from so-and-so with so-and-so information. There's human in the loop. Previous speaker also spoke about it. Who controls that model? Are you going to just take that output and immediately deploy in a production scenario, or is someone scanning through?
Actually checking it.
Checking it, right? So that's your more of a policy safeguard. And one thing that I think a lot of organizations who are very seriously talking generative AI or trying to capture technologies of tomorrow are thinking of doing or have set up our ethics board at the highest levels of the organization. So no matter which organization you go to, you will have an ethics committee set up with your head of risk, head of compliance, and we are talking as HSBC kind of organizations, sometimes at a group level, who are looking at use cases to check for the safety, the suitability against the value being generated. So some policy, some technical safeguards that you try to take in order to sort of guard against unruly results.
I totally agree. In the early days of generative AI, there was this funny case of a lawyer who built an entire case using the output from a generative AI, which turned out to be totally fake. It was based on totally fake cases.
Correct?
Yeah? Think about that. Anyway, so Padma, coming to you, I mean, underlying all this AI or of any kind is data, right? And Shri also mentioned it. What goes as an input, it becomes critical. Therefore, data governance, what's your thoughts and what's your advice in that area? How do you ensure data governance, lineage, provenance, etc.?
Yeah, that's a good question and a very valid one in today's context, right? See, if you will look at, in fact, coming from the industry right now and looking at the kind of demands that we are getting today, right, Ranga? Erstwhile, we were getting more demand for migrating to the cloud, so on and so forth. All those things was happening. The last 1 year or so, we've actually seen a hike hype in demand for all of the data trust layers, right? When I'm saying data trust, it is tagging of data, master data, or how do you, and then lineage of data, how do you find the data within the things, right? Or with respect to quality and so on and so forth, right? So the fear or the worry has actually seeped in already into all of us, all the organizations, to see how do we ensure that we get this straightened, right? We've been in this industry for a very long time, right? Way back when I was doing this for an insurance organization, we used to really struggle figuring out what is a data product, who would own this data product, and who is really the owner for this quality of data that is going inside. When there is a problem with the data, then it is nobody's ownership, right? So we used to start finding out who is to be blamed. But I think from then on till now, we have come a very long way in terms of data governance, and we call it data trust, right? So that is all of these pieces together. Now, to the question of how important it is, right? Look at the analytics and the AI evolution, right? Way back, again, only the banking and the insurance industries were way forward when it comes to the use of advanced analytics, what we used to say. Traceability was very easy for all of us, right? Because we were just using equations, which was very easy for us to find the excess in that. Then it slowly started getting more complex. Then deep learning became much more difficult for you to find out how the lineage of the output that is coming out is you're able to establish became more difficult. And now the generative AI has actually eaten up all of those, right? And you're still searching for things. So two parts to this. One part of it is we use algorithms, especially the deep learning and the generative AI varieties, in areas where we are, at this point in time, okay with a slightly suboptimal output. That is the reality of today, right? So you are not going to use this in use cases of fraud detection, for instance, right? You shouldn't be, right? Or you have a human in the loop. When you're using it, you can, of course, use large models, the image identification, etc., which is complex. In that space, it is very, very useful. Identifying a package in the airport, right? Whether it is, a potential bomb inside or not, you use that, right? So therefore, going back to the data, of course, there is more focus coming into identifying, tagging, finding lineage, so on, and cleaning the data has gone up dramatically, so that we are able to embed more AI everywhere. So that is going up. But at the same time, you can look at the use case and decide how much of an investment you want to do in what kind of data to be able to say, hey, I want to invest here, I want to invest there.
So you're saying that basically the use case determines the trade-off between how much you invest in data governance, the output will determine how much you invest upstream.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point, yeah. Samarth, going on to you, we spoke about data governance as a topic. Assuming if data governance is sorted out, there comes explainability and transparency, yeah, right? Which is crucial to building trust in AI. What strategies or technologies are organizations looking in this area, considering in this area? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the latest things that's being talked about, that explain the AI model. Now, my biggest concern there is, if I can explain the AI model, is this AI at all?
Yeah.
Then these are simple rules. What's the difference between a code and my AI model if I can explain you how this AI reached this conclusion? But at the same time, in industries like medicine and law, it is definitely required, some interpretability is required. You cannot just, there will be no user acceptance if we say that this is take it or leave it, there's some kind of explanations to be given. So that is where I think a lot of effort is being made to, change this black box approach to a white box approach. and show all the steps that have happened in the process. Now, if you're using simple models like regression or decision trees, etc., it's very easy to explain. It's very easy to translate them to English. But when it's neural nets, you know, even if I give the whole, process that has happened from an input vector to the outcome, even a machine learning engineer will not be able to fathom the whole thing, that what has happened. So then how to translate that into English? So, it's more like a backseat driving, right? I mean, if I'm trying to put additional constraints into my AI model and say that do this and don't do this, then it's, something like backseat driving, it doesn't work, turn left, turn right. Let me drive. If you want me to drive, let me drive, or you come and drive. So I think it's a very delicate balance that has to be set up. There are various models being proposed. I think there is no, as far as I know, technical solution right now which gives a direct explainability of the model, especially if it's neural nets and things like that. But the frameworks are being built. I think the latest one is with Gartner, which they are coming up with AI Trism, which is AI transparency and risk and security management something, where then they want to, make sure that your model has followed all the principles of fairness, all the principles of data privacy and other things. So, it's a double-edged sword. One is that, yes, that explainability will be required at some point, but at the same time, we are constraining the model. If we want the model to explain everything that it did, then I think, as Padma said, we'll have to get into a suboptimal area where we do not want the model to, go berserk and give the best solution that it can. So, yeah, another technique which is already existing or which can easily be implemented right away is that when you implement your neural nets, there is typically an ensemble. So, train each one separately, and maybe, it's much more easy to tell, than the user said, see, these were the input features in your vector, and this component brought out the outcome because of these features. And then all of these together work to come out. So there'll be more trust. Yeah, I understand one part of it, so maybe the together it has given me this output. So I think that's where it is, and at the end of the day, it will come down to a cultural shift. We have to work as partners, we have to work as, together. The human and AI has to work together rather than, asking whether we can trust AI, rather we use it to augment, our understanding of it.
Totally agree. Vikas, coming back to you, one of the fears that I have, and we all have, is hacking of AI systems, right? Think of somebody hacking into a system which manages autonomous driving. Think of somebody hacking into a system which manages drones. Yeah, and this is a clear concern for all of us, right? So what should businesses be doing to protect AI system from any kind of attack, adversarial, cyber, anything of that sort? Yeah, your views, please.
Yeah, this is a very important question that every organization asks, that how do I prevent my data from any kind of a cyber threat for that reason? Anyone who watches the treasure hunting movie, you can think of that this has been happening for a very long time. Data is your treasure, and then how do you protect it? Old times, people would do the encryptions on their walls and all those same thing, those kind of protections are required here too, that you encrypt your data, you put the access controls over it, then how do you do it? One of the important aspect technology-wise is that how do you anonymize your data? There are many anonymizing algorithms available out there that you can use to anonymize your PII information into your data, that even if the cyber the hackers can access it, they won't be able to make out of the data that what they can do about it. One of the most important aspects that the new techniques which are coming out is called adversarial training, that when you are actually training your models, you intentionally feed in false information or untrue information into your models, so that your models are trained to identify those kind of leakages or threats that can happen. One of the biggest threat that we have seen is that people will try to sneak into your systems, and organizations I have seen have tried to kind of put together the teams which are more aware about the cyber threats, so that they can make the decisions when they see those kind of cyber threats happening. And another team they put together is what they call red teams. The red teams is nothing but in a simple language, it's hackers. Go ahead and hire hackers who can actually break your system. Let them break your system and try to find how they break their system and fix those. So I would say that put together a red team in your organization if you think that you have a huge amount of information that you want to protect, encrypt, put access controls, use anonymization algorithms, and spread the awareness amongst your employees in operations, every other function that you can think of, that what are the cyber threats out there, and then let them be aware of that to identify those cyber threats.
Yeah. Good ideas. Yeah, very interesting. Now, Shri, you spoke about the ethics board in your organization, right? And
In multiple organizations.
multiple organization, right? And so talk about the ethical considerations one needs to keep in mind when looking at risk versus reward of using AI systems. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an interesting one, right? Organizations across the world are vested in right now research around be it various versions of AI or Gen AI. Of course, there's a reward in place. And when you think about the possibilities or the way your art of possible simply proliferates, earlier you had each of individual models. Now suddenly everything comes together in one bundle. You have this packaged box. I can reduce my TAT by n number of nx times. I can bring products unimaginable and platforms unimaginable, codes unimaginable, with some help from open along with generation, right? So yes, of course the frontiers are vast ahead of the organizations, which is why we are talking the reward part of it. Having said that, there has to be a balance between the right risk mitigations and the rewards that we are visualizing at this point. So to Padma's point, this is an area where right now we're really at the tip of iceberg. We are really nascent. It's called the grace period, a honeymoon period, or not even a honeymoon period, it's a grace period. You're trying to understand what the tools can do for you while experimenting in test lab in very controlled environment and checking what those boundaries are. So this is where within those control, every day we are learning, by the way. So it's not that it's done and dusted and we can sit here, or anybody like us can sit here and tell you this is it. But having said that, some of the mitigants that organizations possibly are thinking through could be, the ethics, the fairness, the transparency, the data fed into, going into some of these models, and what kind of risk matrices or risk mitigation frameworks do we have. An example is like DALI, right? Couple of months back, the kind of newspaper and media fury that happened over DALI's description of a nurse or a doctor. Give those words, nurse comes from one specific gender, doctor comes from one specific ethnicity. Why? Very large data used for training, mostly external data used for training, and it just regressed towards an average which is fed in, which may or may not be accurate. So training data sets are important. Then when you start thinking about at an organizational level, we spoke a lot in my earlier conversation also, we spoke quite a bit around technology safeguards, we spoke a bit of policy safeguards. But when you think about organizations who thrive for their stakeholders, like a customer, their shareholders, what kind of assurance can we provide to our shareholder that, whatever we are doing in our test lab is not going to become the Wall Street News or the Guardian News or the Times of India News next day? So this is where, again, to your points, the privacy assurance, what information we are using, how we are doing things, all of that entire area around assurance becomes one big guardrail for an organization. For customers, not only assurance, anonymity. It's not that we are experimenting and hence something of yours is going to be available in open network, right? So how do I provide that safety, trust, anonymity, and fairness, our promises of meeting fairness, equitable solutions. So each version that we evaluate in a taste lab controlled environment with adaptive loop back, with really, controlling the machine, we need to think through each of those organizational promises to its stakeholders. Employee is a big area, right? The Hollywood actors strike, Hollywood
Exactly.
writers strike, because there's always a fear of, will my job go away? Will all the repeatable tasks be done by an AI right now sitting somewhere? And hence, what does it mean for me? So there is an entire aspect that the organization has to manage through the culture, the literacy, the awareness build with the employees to say that, okay, employees as my stakeholder, which use cases, what kind of use cases are we taking forward, and how do I provide that, again, safety assurance back to you in terms of, what we are trying to do. So yes, it is a journey which has started now. The rewards are high enough. Risk mitigation, stakeholder mitigation, assurance becomes a large part of the component of this journey.
Great points. I think there's a lot that needs to be done in that area.
There's
Yeah.
a lot to be done
Yeah,
right
exactly. Samarth, you spoke about the human value. Let me get back to you on that. How do you align AI systems with human values or societal values? How do you really do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's another of the vexing questions. What are human values in the first place? So, I think there is again a various layers of when we say human values. As far as I know, Alexa is very polite. Ask her any weirdest questions, she is very polite. I don't know the answer to this. So she's following the human values there. But at the same time, there is a much deeper kind of a, understanding which is about desires and emotions and stuff like that, you know, related to the question of bias. So a lot of times AI is throwing out the bias that a particular community it shows out as, criminals. It rejects all the driving licenses for women. Those are the type of things where how do we now make it learn that these things are not acceptable to us humans? So again, it comes back to the same question that whether we want it to operate in its most optimal manner, and then we create a layer of human, review or augmentation around it, or we build in the constraints. We build in the constraints. At the end of the day, AI is all about constraint satisfaction. So we build in those constraints that yes, you cannot be doing this. You cannot be, pointing out to a particular gender. You cannot be pointing out to a particular race and things like that. So, in fact, this is one of the biggest difference, I think, between human intelligence and artificial intelligence at this point. That humans have some of these things which are not related just to past experience. I might not have experienced anything in past, but somehow I can do that. Like when somebody invented fire, he hadn't thought about any heat or anything. He just thought that this would be a good thing. Whereas AI would operate only on the information that is already available. And I think the values come from there, come from that other segment, wherein it might not be definite, necessarily historical. I just know that this is right or this is wrong. So there are two approaches to it, as I said. One is that we do create this layer that, any model anyway is not more than 90% accurate. We all are data scientists, we know, any model more than 90% accurate is a wrong model, right? So we let the model output, and then we put a human review to it. And second is that within the rules, within the constraints, within the problem definition, we put in all the, possible kind of human values to it, that these things should also be adhered by the model. So I think one of these two approaches we need to take.
Understood. Great points. Padma, let me close with you on this. We got data governance sorted out. We looked at the biases.
Yes.
How do we ensure the models work at the highest levels of accuracy? Yeah?
I'm just laughing because should I say that highest level of accuracy is like a myth? but that's a very good question, right? So that's one of the important questions we need to actually also ask, whether we want this model to be of highest accuracy, right? What I mean to say is that, now organizations are running with humongous models. Forget data. If people would, in the erstwhile times, think I'm talking about data, we're talking about models. If you're talking to a CPG organization, you have multiple product SKUs per product, right? So every SKU has its own model running. And imagine the number of models we are running in an organization, right? So in this mammoth this thing, how do you bring some kind of meaning to this madness, if I can use the word, right? Is first of all to break down your models into saying, which are the models that I need this super accuracy, right? And therefore the explainability, blah, 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 right? Those need to be given a different set of treatment, right? What kind of treatment? Their ethics plays a very big role. You talked about it, Shubhri. Then there is audit which should be put in place to continuously see whether the model is performing to what it was originally set out for. Even the models which are absolutely explainable, for those of you who've been working for a long time now, would know that there is a data drift that can happen, that model drift that can happen, a new feature can become more important than the time when we would actually built it, right? All these things can happen. So in that cohort of models, you need to put utmost importance from the data governance is important, and to the model, and to post-model go live in terms of continuously monitoring and how do you recalibrate the data at the right points in time so that you're always able to find the lineage and explain to the whole thing. And it is accurate at all points in time. Now to the rest of the world. Now, of course, you can go into multiple cohorts, right? One is a medium kind of a thing and the other one which can just run on its own. But whatever be the case, I think AI governance in that sense is absolutely important for all of us, right? And a good MLOps underneath always ensures that you have a control on each of the cohorts of models you're running and how are you monitoring this at any point in time, right? But I just wanted one more point in this whole thing when I'm talking about, right? So we've gone all the way, as I was explaining earlier, from a linear model, regression model where you can identify everything to, deep learning to neural networks, and then to go on to Gen AI, which is becoming, it's basically we are giving more power to the thing and adding humongous data for it to do everything. But the circle of life is sometimes, I feel, coming back as well, right? Why I'm saying this, there are new things like liquid AI is now being experimented, right? If people have Googled it, they will know, right? It is about keeping the model not so heavy, right? Not having humongous trillions and trillions of data, but to reduce the data, but be able to explain, but also allow the model to continuously realign itself, right? With a new set of streaming data, right? This is happening already, right? Which means, and the driverless and et cetera, which today we don't even know why the accident has happened if it is an autonomous car, you should be able to do that with a lesser footprint kind of an AI model, right? So there is a lot that is happening in this space, I think, to be able to, number one, as I said, figure out where your accuracy is important, where your explainability is important, where do you want to go behind, where do you want to let it go. So I think it is now a full-fledged
exercise by itself.
parallel IT,
Yes.
right, in that sense, to be able to
Got it.
monitor to ensure that.
Absolutely. I think great views from the panelists. I think we landed well on time. I wonder if we have time for any questions.